everybody, Andrew from Go Green Compost here, and in this video I'm going to give you a quick rundown of how I built a 3-foot tall Hugelkultur raised bed. And to get started here in this first image, I didn't think to take a before picture of my 1-foot raised beds before I made this video, so you can kind of see on the right there, I have these existing beds. They were a foot tall like that one. I built those a little over a year ago. They haven't been that productive. They have produced some vegetables, but everything that I plant there just seems to kind of get along. It doesn't really seem to thrive. Some things have died outright. And a friend of mine who's a more experienced gardener than myself recommended increasing the depth of the soil from 1 foot to 3 feet. So make the bed a lot taller. So I went ahead and did that. And I also kind of built the bed on a Hugelkultur theme. I put a bunch of rotting wood and material at the core, and that's what I'm going to show you what I did here. But to get started, I just took the 1-foot bed, the 1-foot raised bed, and I built it up with some more 2x6s with the support beams at the corner there. So I had just built up the wood frame, and then I had to fill it. And this is how I did that. To get started, there were some plants growing in there, so I just tilled everything up at the bottom, tilled it all back into the soil. And then the first layer of stuff I added was just this brush, branches, sticks that had kind of been sitting around in my yard. I didn't want to get rid of them because they were good carbon material, but I didn't want to put them in the compost heap because they make it a pain to turn. So they just kind of been sitting in a pile. So I threw those in there. It was nice to get the opportunity to clean up the yard and also fill the bed at the same time. Next thing I started with was this giant stump that I had found at the neighbor's curb several months ago. And I had just dragged it away because I knew at some point I was going to want some wood for a hugel bed. And so this thing was really big. It probably weighed about 200 pounds. It was tough to get off the curb and to the yard, and dragging it around was kind of tough. So before I threw it in the bed, I started cutting it down to size and just cutting off all the extra branches that I could easily with my silky pruning saw there. If you need to cut up some branches, silky saws are awesome. I'm a big fan, and that pruning saw is no exception. It made short work of this stump and allowed me to trim it down to size. As you can see here, I trimmed off basically all of the protruding small limbs. One, to make the stump lighter and easier to get into the bed, but also just to make it a little more compact so it wasn't sticking up out of the bed. And then to put it in the bed, I kind of dug a little depression to lay it down in and oriented it so it was as low as possible so those branches weren't sticking up. And I threw in all those extra little branches I had cut off of it as well. And then the next thing I threw in was some pigeon pea or gandule branches. I've got a bunch of pigeon peas in the yard and they needed to be pruned, so I went ahead and just threw the branches directly into the bed here just to add some more carbon material. And then this was some extra wood I had sitting in this compost bin that I'd been saving again for a time like this. Mostly branches and stuff I'd either grabbed off of the neighbor's curb or stuff that had fallen out of my own trees and I had just cut up and left in here. Also a couple of logs like that one you see there, and those were from the neighbor's curb. They had a tree removed or something like that, and it was sitting out one day, so I grabbed it. And so I threw that in, also a couple more gandule branches on top you can see. And then that was a lot of carbon material, all that rotting wood. So I wanted to add some nitrogen material as well to accelerate the decomposition there and just to make for more of like a balanced compost core for this bed. So I dumped in 3 buckets of restaurant waste that you see here. Dumped those right on top of the wood, kind of tried to spread it out and do an even layer. Then I went ahead and added just a layer of dirt that I had from the yard. This was dirt that was left over from a project where we had to bury a post in the ground. So we had some dirt from the excavation. I just went ahead and dumped that on top. Our native soil is pretty sandy, so this was really partially just because I wanted to quickly put something on top of those food scraps before a bunch of flies came around, but also just to add some bulk to the bed. I mean, this bed is big. It's 8 by 4 feet, and at 3 feet tall, it requires a lot of mass or a lot of volume of dirt. So just threw that in, a thin layer of it on top of everything that's already been in there. And then I went ahead and opened up my GeoBin composters to get some more material for the bed. And as you can see on top there, there's a bunch of kind of dry grass and vegetable material on both of those beds that hasn't really started to compost yet. So I went ahead and you can see here the bed and the compost area are pretty close, so this is nice. Don't have to move things too far. But I went ahead and threw that grass and dry stuff from the compost bins on top of the dirt that we had just added. And then I started getting into the core of the finished compost. You can see that nice black humusy material in the middle of that heap there. And I just pitchforked a bunch of that into the bed to kind of cover everything else up. This compost is pretty much finished. It does have some chunks in it, some remaining leaves and some sticks and twigs. But once I put a layer of that to cover everything, I got out the sifter here and just started sifting the finished compost into nicer, kind of more humusy material like this, getting all the sticks and big chunks out, making it easy to kind of mix and rake. And the reason for that is, one, this is a lot nicer to plant into, but also I'm going to start mixing in peat moss with this compost and some vermiculite as well. As you can see here, after I dumped in that initial load from the kiddie pool, I started just sifting directly into the bed. And here's some of the vermiculite I added. So I just was kind of a process of adding compost, peat moss, and vermiculite, and then mixing it with the rake, and then repeating until the bed was filled up. And you can see here it's gotten to a pretty nice level. That's some real nice humusy, well-draining, moisture-retaining mix. The peat moss, vermiculite, and finished compost. And then just for good measure, I sifted in some of these worm castings that I harvested from my worm composter. And I added a drip irrigation line. And then the last thing I did was add this mulch on top of everything just to help the bed retain even more moisture. So I'm hoping that this coming growing season, this fall, I'll be able to plant some stuff in this bed and get a better yield due to the larger size, the better moisture retention, the addition of that drip irrigation line, so I can keep the bed watered more regularly. I'm in the process of building a PVC system to go out to that, so I can put this bed and some of the other beds on a timer for irrigation with the drip irrigation. So I'm hoping that, plus the larger size of the bed and the mulch, should help. The rotting material at the core of the bed should help retain moisture and feed it back out during really dry times, so it keeps helps regulate the moisture levels of the bed. And also, as it decomposes, it just helps to increase the health of the soil and help boost microorganisms and nutrients in the soil as well. So we'll see. I'll keep you updated. It's been about a week actually since these pictures were taken, and already out in the bed, I haven't planted anything out there yet, but there are a bunch of nice volunteer cougar bits that are growing. I'm not going to cut them down until it's time to plant. Maybe some of them will just take over and I'll like them so much I'll let them grow. But we'll see. And I'll keep you updated on how this bed does as far as production. But thanks for watching, everybody. If you have any tips or tricks for building garden beds, please let me know. I hope this video was helpful for anyone out there who was looking for some information on this topic.